From the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, 443 AD. This year sent the Britons oversea to Rome and begged assistance against the Pics, but they had none, for the Romans were at war with Attila, king of the Huns. Then sent they to the Angles and requested the same from the nobles of that nation. History remains unsure about Vortigern, or even if Vortigern was indeed a name or a title. Some suggest that Vortigern just means High King. And so the story we have for Vortigern starts with the historical facts of the end of Roman rule in Britain and the invitation of the Saxon mercenaries, and then is embellished with mythology and legend. And so this is typical of the period known as the Dark Ages of Britain. Geoffrey of Monmouth tells us of Vortigern's rise to power, and he tells us that after the death of King Constantine III, there was some indecision as to who should take the throne. He left 3 sons who were in line to inherit the throne, the first and the eldest being Constans, the second being Ambrosius Aurelius, and the third Uther Pendragon. Now Constans was the eldest of the 3 boys, but he had been sent off to a monastery when he was young. And so there was arguing amongst the nobles of which of the 2 other sons should take the throne. But Vortigern stepped in and said he had a solution. He would go and talk to Constans, and he would get him to give up his monastic vows and take up his position as the High King of Britain. And this he did, but Constans was at first reluctant, but Vortigern spoke to him and said he would mentor the young king. And so, with Vortigern's help, Constans agreed to take on the role. So in effect, what had really happened here is that Vortigern had manipulated Constans to take the role of High King, but in reality it was Vortigern that had the power and was going to run the country. Now once things had settled down and Constans' rule was established and accepted, Vortigern played his next card, and that was to get rid of the young king and take power for himself. And to accomplish this, Vortigern organised for a group of Pics to assassinate Constans. And so now Vortigern was in control and declared himself High King of Britain. However, trouble still continued, with the Picts still attacking from the north and the Scoti coming over from Ireland and raiding the villages. And then there were the Saxons that were raiding the south coast and landing on the south coast. So Vortigern thought he would use an old Roman trick and turn one enemy against the other. And so he spoke to the Saxon leaders, Hengest and Horsa. So Vortigern sent to Hengest and Horsa and asked them if they would join him in fighting the Picts in the north in return for some grants of land in the south. Now to Hengest and Horsa, this is exactly what they wanted to hear, and they were more than happy to lend assistance to Vortigern. And after one battle, where the Saxons won decisively, with practically no help needed at all from Vortigern's armies, Vortigern held a feast in celebration for the victory. And Vortigern was so happy that he started putting away the booze, and he was becoming a bit, well, let's just say he was a little bit tipsy, and he took a fancy to one of the girls that was serving the beer. And it just so happened that that girl was the daughter of Hengest. Now Hengest, he could see what was happening, and he could see that the king perhaps had one or two meads too many. And he thought, as the opportunist that he was, that he would take advantage of the situation. And he said to Vortigern, I see you like my daughter, and she is available. Now with that, Vortigern was well spurred on, and he said to Hengest, what is it you would take as a dowry for the hand of your daughter? Well, said Hengest, for the father-in-law of the High King of Britain, it must be something that would be worthy of such a position. And my people, they have landed and settled on the shores of Kent. And so, perhaps, if you grant me the kingdom of Kent as a dowry, then that could be fitting. And so with Vortigern and a little wine and mead fueling his passion, he agreed there and then that Hengest and Horsa should have a kingdom of their own in Britain, and that kingdom would be the kingdom of Kent. And so, for Hengest, all is going to plan, and the Saxons now have their first foothold in Britain. And so now, the Picts, they didn't give up. Their attacks became increasingly more and more violent and daring. So much so that the Saxons said, We need to get more men. We need to bring in more men. And Vortigern agreed, yes, bring in more men, and we will give you food and supplies. But this kept going on, and more Saxons came across, and they wanted more food, more supplies, more land to settle. Now the penny seemed to start to drop for Vortigern, and he started to think that these Saxons are more trouble than the Pics. I can't keep supplying them with food and giving them more and more land. Where's this going to end? All of a sudden, now it seems like the Saxons are running the country. And so Vortigern said, enough's enough. No more Saxons, no more food, no more supplies, no more land. Yeah, the Saxons didn't want to hear this. Everything had been going nicely to plan. And now Vortigern was going to cut them off. Well, to hell with him, they thought. And we'll teach Vortigern a lesson or two. There's enough of us here now. And with that, they decided they'd go and get their own food and take their own land and get their own supplies. And the way they'll do it is by creating widespread destruction all around them and forcing the peasants off the land. And they would take over the land and they would take their food and take their supplies. And we'll see what Vortigern has to say about that. So at this point in time, Vortigern loses support of the nobles of the kingdom, and his son Vortimer takes over, and he wages war against the Saxons, and he drives them back out of Kent. Now Vortimer ends up being killed at one of these battles, and so rule returns back to Vortigern. But Vortigern is still having problems with the Pics, and his wife, as we recall, who is the daughter of Hengest, convinces Vortigern to ask Hengist to come back over with just a small army to help him out. So Vortigern, who seems to have a pretty short memory, falls for it, and he sends to Hengist and he asks him again for help to come over with a small group of mercenaries to help him up in the north. Hengist is ecstatic. He knows he's got Vortimer's number. Between him and his daughter, he's got Vortigern wrapped around his finger, and he's heard of Vortimer's death. But instead of coming back with a small army, as Vortigern had suggested, he put together a huge army, and this was pretty much a Saxon invasion of Britain. Now, when word had got back to Vortigern about this huge army that Hengist was bringing back over, well, he got rather upset. And he sent word to Hengist to tell him that he shouldn't land, or he would be facing the might of Britain. Hengist sent back a reply to tell Vortigern, well, I only brought this many troops because we thought Vortimer may still be alive, and this was a trick. Now that we know the Vortimer's gone, I'm more than happy to send back what mercenaries you don't need, and just bring those that you do. If we can only organise to have a sit down and a meeting to discuss the arrangements. So Vortigern thought, well, that explains all that then. So yes, I will have a meeting and we'll work out exactly what I want him to do for me. And so Vortigern organised for a meeting, and Hengest was to bring his top commanders, and Vortigern was going to bring all the noblemen and decision makers in his kingdom, and they would sit down and they would discuss exactly what they would require from the Saxons. But Hengest, as Vortigern should know, is not a man to be trusted. Hengest organised all his top commanders and he ordered them to carry a dagger hidden within their boot. And he told them, at my signal, you shall grab the man next to you and you will slit his throat. And by this action, we will be rid of all the kings and noblemen of Britain, and Britain will belong to us. So the meeting was arranged by Vortigern. It was to take place on the first day of May at a place now known as Salisbury. And according to Hengest's plan, during the meeting he grabbed Vortigern and gave the signal so that all his men should reach into their boots and pull out the dagger and slit the throat of the man next to them. Now it wasn't quite that easy. Hengest got Vortigern, but some of the other nobles put up a fight, and so it wasn't just a one-way battle, but the Saxons were victorious, and they did kill off most of the noblemen in Britain. And Vortigern was captured and held in fear of his life. Now Vortigern, in return for his life, was forced to hand over substantial parts of Britain. And once he had agreed on oath to hand over all this land, then they let him go. Vortigern fled to the far west and north of Wales, where he demanded answers from his prophets and his seers as to how he should defend himself. And the court was in agreement, and they told him that he needed to build himself an impenetrable fort in the Snowdon mountain range, and the place chosen was on the southern slopes of the mountain Ir Aran, just above a town that's known today as Bethgelert. So immediately he organised for construction to start on this impenetrable fortress. The only problem is that every morning when they woke up, they saw that the work from the previous day had been demolished. Now, lost for answers, Vortigern again turns to his seers and prophets and demands to know why this is happening and what can he do to stop it. And so he is told that unfortunately they don't have any answers, but they have heard of a boy who was born without a father, and a boy that was born to the fair folk. So Vortigern sends out his men to search for such a boy, and they find him in a place now known as Carmarthen. Now this boy was said to have been born without a father, and he was born in a cave just outside the town of Carmarthen. And all the people within the town of Carmarthen knew fair well that that cave was the entrance to the other world, and the place where the fair folk lived. The boy's name, of course, was Myrddin Emrys, otherwise known to us today by the name Merlin. Now Myrddin was taken back to Vortigern, and he told Vortigern the reason why all the work is being demolished every morning is because underneath the mountain lived 2 dragons, and there was a red dragon and a white dragon, and the red dragon represented the Britons and the white dragon represented the Saxons, and they fought. And when they fought, the whole mountain shook, and thereby all the construction work that they had carried out the day before was destroyed. And what was worse, Myrddin told him that the white dragon was winning. Now, Vortigern didn't like that idea at all, and he fled again to another of his older fortresses built along the coast. Now time went on, and Vortigern was keeping his head down low, because he had heard another misfortune may be coming his way. And that other misfortune was Ambrosius Aurelius, the exiled brother to Constans. And Constans, of course, was the king that Vortigern had organized to be killed by the Pics. And so Ambrosius Aurelius had a couple of scores to even here. One, to get even with Vortigern for murdering his brother, and 2, the throne now was rightfully his. And it seems now that he has grown into a big, strong, burly man with lots of support, and he has got an army. And what's more, the word is that he's now headed Vortigern's way. So Vortigern, now terrified of his oncoming fate, if he stays what he is, then Aurelius is going to have him strung up. So Vortigern again flees, and he flees this time to a fortress, a hidden wooden fortress right on the sea. So now Vortigern feels secure. He's heading away now, and nobody's going to find him here at this old wooden fortress. What Vortigern didn't bargain on, though, however, was that there was a huge storm raging out at sea. And as that storm approached, there were great bolts of lightning and thunder, and one of the bolts of lightning hit the fort, and the fort, being made of wood, burned down to the ground with Vortigern inside. And so it was said that Vortigern died a cruel and painful death, being burnt alive in this old wooden fortress. And Vortigern was never heard of again.